we will be discussing our most recent case study on how Midgroup was able to save over 1,500 hours through automated BIM data validation. On the webinar today, we're actually lucky enough to have Stephen Chudley, the BIM Design and Technology Director for Midgroup. We also have Wajdi Sahone, who is the General Manager of the Sterling BIM team, which is Midgroup's in-house BIM group. We also have Mia Deeb, she is our Implementation Manager here at 3D Repo. And then my name is Jack Williams, I'm the Senior Account Manager here. So just a bit of housekeeping, guys, as well. So there will be polls that will populate throughout the webinar today. So if you could answer them, that would be much appreciated, because that helps with our product. And then if you guys have any questions at all, please do submit them through the taskbar, which should be on your right-hand side. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll go through them together and we'll have a bit of a collective conversation. So just in terms of the agenda today, to start off with, I'm going to be providing an introduction to 3D Repo, just a bit of a high-level overview of the solution. Following on from that, we're going to go through the challenges around data validation, and Steve will be covering that topic and what that meant to Midgroup. Then we're going to go through the solution, which Wajdi will be discussing and how they use 3D Repo and developing out that workflow. And then to finish things off, we're going to do a live demonstration, which is going to be a joint effort from Mia Deeb, showing how smart groups are created. And then Wajdi is going to do the demonstration of some of the Power BI dashboards they've exported from 3D Repo. And then finally, we'll do a live Q&A session. So just to start things off, so 3D Repo is a 100% web-based BIM platform, right? So we give you really easy access to your 2D, 3D, and 4D geometry all through the web browser. But the great thing about it as well is that we're also a data management tool. So we give you access to all that underlying BIM data as well. But it's really important to have an understanding of our founding principles, right? And so the first one being that sometimes BIM software can be too complicated. For digital engineers and BIM users, who are designing in tools like Revit or other Bentley products, they know how to use these complicated softwares. But there's a lot of other people at the end of the project who aren't used to being involved in that process. So we wanted to create a platform that really connected BIM user with an end user in a really easy to use, intuitive platform. But what we also see on projects a lot of the times is that BIM actually creates knowledge silos, which is kind of interesting, right? Because it should be collaborative. But what you see is, especially on large projects, when people are designing in different authoring tools that are not necessarily compatible with each other, you'll see a lack of information exchange. And then these teams will actually start to work in their own silos, right? Which also brings us on to the point around interoperability, which is very difficult. And this comes down to software vendors locking you into proprietary file formats and not making that data available for everyone and aggregating it together. So how 3D Repo works and how we position ourselves is that we sit on top of a project. You should be able to upload whatever data format you like to our platform, aggregate the data together, and then make it accessible for everyone through the web browser. We also believe that your data needs to be accessible with no proprietary data lock-in. So when we say this, that means you completely own your data, right? We don't own it. So at the end of the project, if you want to download all your data back from us, we give you that option to do so without any additional cost. But we also make all your data accessible, right? So we give you a list of APIs that you can push and pull your information to and from different tools. And we're going to be speaking a bit more about that today as well in the session. And then finally, every project is different. So whether you're working on residential, commercial, infrastructure, a lot of the times the tools you use to design those projects will change, right? You still need to have a project where everyone can collaborate and coordinate together, regardless of what the file formats are, and 3D Repo is the tool to enable you to do that. So just an overview of the platform. What we do is that we take the majority of the major BIM file formats in the industry and we upload them to the 3D Repo cloud. So the really interesting thing about our platform is actually how we store your data. We don't just store it as proprietary file formats. Essentially what we do is that we crack the proprietary file formats open and we store it as an open format, which allows you to start to federate different models together. So, if you're working on a project that you're designing in different tools and you may need to federate an IFC with a Revit model and a GGN, you can do that. Or if you're working, have two different versions of Revit, which seems to be a massive problem, you could bring those into 3D Repo and they will work together if it's 2021 and 2022 model. But we also give you the ability to be able to push these different types of models into gaming engines like Unity or Unreal Engine, where you can develop your own visualization applications or digital twin applications as well, where 3D Repo is used as the model repository tool to do that. And then last of all, what I absolutely love about the platform is how we use our APIs, right? So everything you can do on the front end, you can do on the back end as well. So pushing and pulling information. We've got some really cool slides that obviously we'll be going through, talking about the workflow of bringing data from Asite, coming into 3D Repo, and then pushing them out into their Power BI dashboards, which is all automated. So I'll let them discuss that instead of me. Just a quick one around the data consumption. So how do you actually get your models into 3D Repo? So there's a few different ways you can do that. The first way can be via a plugin. So we offer plugins for Revit, AutoCAD, Navisworks, Civil 3D. You can push your models directly into 3D Repo through those plugins. You can direct upload to the platform. So these are some of the various file formats that we're compatible with. And then the most popular way, and which Big Group I think have loved, is via the common data environment. So completely automating the process of models coming from a CDE and then making them readily available in 3D Repo, ensuring that you're working off the latest revisions. Now, to security, so we are ISO 9001 and 27001 certified. We have our cyber essentials. 3D Repo is fully developed here by our London software development team, and everything we do is encrypted and access protected by an API service wrapper. And just in terms of our hosting options, so we can be flexible with this. So we do host our multi-tenanted server through AWS, which is based here in London. We have a server that's been spun up in Montreal for a project that we're doing up there. But if you do require private cloud deployment, we can arrange it for you through the likes of like Google Cloud, AWS, or Microsoft Azure. And lastly, we can provide on-premise as well. So look, that's just a really quick sort of insight into 3D Repo. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a poll up, and if everyone can put their answers in, that'll be much appreciated. And Steve, I will hand it over to you to start talking about the challenges around data validation.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack.
And so you should have control now, Steve. There we go.
There we go.
Nice.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the aim for us as mid-group is to have the BIM information as the single source of truth for construction projects, and that's throughout the project lifecycle. And the key element of that is actually for our site teams, and through that sort of actual, the muck and bullets, if you like, of a construction site. Now, we've had some successes through mid-group's history, and when we started mid-group, we set this this kind of lofty aim, if you like, from the very outset. So working from sort of some of the images that we've got up on screen on there, we've done virtual reality, where we've taken the BIM models and put them through a virtual reality engine. And we can see that we've got a nice comparison there between what we see in the VR and what we've done on site sort of 4 years later. And the reason that looks very, very similar is because it's based on that BIM construction level information. We also incorporate our manufacturers. So we have a strong emphasis on MMC within our business. So the next image across with the screenshot from 3D Repo, the yellow element highlighted is from our timber SIPs manufacturer, and that's their fabrication data. And that fabrication data has been coordinated and federated with the MEP model in that case. So we're looking to make sure that that fabrication data is aligned with our MEP model. The next one down is a screenshot from our Power BI and a 3D Repo, sort of that tie up, and we've got, from another one of our schemes, we've got embedded carbon data in there. And then the last one in the bottom right is our BIM-based cost plans that from very much almost the outset of mid-group, all of our tender projects have been done with BIM-based cost plans produced. So we've had some successes, but there are still barriers and there are still issues that we see with actually getting the real construction data into the hands of our site teams and our suppliers and our supply chain. And those barriers tend to be around model quality and consistency. So making sure that absolutely everything that we ask for in our EIRs and BEPs is included in there. Interoperability and data portability is also an issue. So I've been involved in the BIM world for 12 years. After about sort of 12 months, it took me 12 months to realize that actually the real value in BIM is in the is in the information. And I've probably been trying to get hold of that information in a really easy format ever since then. And I'm just about starting to get hold of that data, which is absolutely brilliant. But that's the issue, is actually getting hold of that data and being able to use it is a real barrier. And that ties in with the next bit, which is information availability. It doesn't need to be available just to me. It needs to be available to everybody in the site team. Everybody from the construction guys, from the site guys, from the guy on the gate to the project leader, the commercial manager. We all need to have access to that information. The other barrier that we see is level of information and detail. So one of the examples I used was about getting fabrication details, that level of detail into the models. And we try to push that all the while, because we see if you've not modeled it in the way that it's built, it's not going to be valuable for those site teams. So that's some of the barriers around kind of that we see and have on a day-to-day basis about really utilizing BIM for construction teams. Now, the first one in that list is about model quality. So how do we ensure that we get the right model quality? And we do model validations. So until we created the workflow that Wajdi is going to talk you through, this was our model checking procedure. So we'd undertake a model QA check, every model that we receive. But it's a manual check, and it's not every object within the model. Some of these models have upwards of 40,000 objects. You can't check every single one. We'll go through and we'll identify some key model issues. We've found that the Sterling BIM team have found that actually quite often spreadsheets is the easiest way. There are other different ways you can do it, that you can use technology, but it's still always manipulating and handling that data manually. We then have to issue that spreadsheet to our supply chain, to the people who actually created the model. We then need to review the findings, discuss it, understand each one of the issues, and then update that model. And again, a manual process. So as you can see, just by outlining that briefly, that there's an enormous amount of effort included in this process. And with the standard sort of 2-week issuing process that we have set up, you know, in most BEPs, EIR, like, you can see that you're almost on this sort of constant merry-go-round to try to improve these models to get them to the right standard. And we found that, so in the last 12 months of Mid-Group, we've had 440 models issued through Asite and into 3D Repo. That's an enormous amount of work that we've got to look at and go through. And also within Mid-Group, we have a varying range of project sizes from 2 million up to 55 million. Now, we can have some quite tight timeframes on some of those. So actually getting through this process and getting to the point where our models are really, really good is actually a real challenge. So the challenge that was set was to make sure that we check every item in the model. So this is about how do we improve this model validation? How can we improve this process? So check every item in the model is an absolute real sort of given, really. We have to automate it. We have to. There's no way we can check every single model with a human, every single item, every single model with a human being. It's just not feasible. So we have to do it at scale as well. So we have to run it across all of our projects. It has to be across all formats. It has to be across everything that we receive. We've got to share that knowledge of the model quality with everybody so that everybody knows. So there may be instances where that model quality isn't quite there. But if everybody understands where that model quality is not as good as it should be, we know that, so the rest of it is great and we can use it. We have more confidence with using that model. The ultimate aim is obviously to improve the model quality. And then which then feeds back into that strategic goal of utilising the BIM model for all that construction information, whether that is 4D, 5D, whatever purpose we need to use it for suppliers. It needs to be sort of model material quantification. It needs to be used for everything. And by doing this model validation process that we've set up, it's just another step in ensuring that we meet our strategic aim. So I will now hand over to Wajdi, who will take us through what we've done.
Yeah, just across the control, Jack. Yeah, go back. Yeah, so everything Steve told and described boils down to one solution in front of mid-group joint with Sterling BIM is to have an automated process for the review of our models and all the models we get from our consultants. And after a lot of brainstorming and discussions and a lot of research, we came down to a set of properties for this process. So first of all, it has to cut down the review duration of those models. We have tens of hundreds of models that needs to be reviewed. And as well as other tasks that our information managers need to do in terms of getting involved in that project and in terms of information management. So that durations needs to be cut down because it usually takes a lot of time to download those models from our common data environment, opening them. Some of them are in IFC, needs to be converted into a openable Revit file. That took a lot of time in order to go through all of the elements of that model. Next is to expand the review areas. Mainly our review process focused on the major bits of the model. So we were reviewing the naming conventions, the alignment of the model, and a few bits of best practices of modeling. They were limited because of the time frames we are facing. So after reviewing those models, some discussions, as Steve said, happens with the consultant in order to review and improve their models. So this process, the new process, it needs to highlight the deficiencies or the errors and mistakes in those models in order to get better models. That process needs to be automated. The minimum is to be semi-automated process with the minimum human input to it. It needs to be consistent for all of the models we get across all of our schemes and projects. And it needs to be transparent and fair by saying that everyone has to have an access to those models, to have an idea about how their models are performing in terms of our protocols and standards, how their models are complying with the BEPs and the information requirements or EIRs. So the workflow has been re-engineered to, trying to change the slide again, takes a bit of time. Can you switch the slide, Jack? Can you do me that favor? Yeah, that's it. So the process, while it was just the consultant uploading their models to our common data environment, Asite, we go download those models, compare them, open them, go through a sample of the elements we have. Not every single object we were able to go and review it. We just picked a sample and give an example of the errors found in that model. Now, once the consultant push or upload their model to the common data environment, to Asite, it gets pushed in an automatic process to 3D repo, while keeping that model hidden under review for the rest of the project team. Once we have the model on 3D repo, our information managers go through that model, assign or upload the smart groups that Mia is going to cover. Those smart groups cover all of the aspects that we're going to review in that model. Once we have those smart groups in that model, the data or the model data, metadata, being pushed to our Power BI pre-engineered, pre-designed templates of the model compliance review or the MCR, as we call it. And once it's done, it's a matter of a click to refresh the report. And you'll have your result. You have your full review of the model. And in the live demonstration, we're going to go through what areas we cover in the review. Jack, next, please. So the MCR, or the Model Compliance Review or report, those are the main 3 areas of review, and those just a bit, the tip of the iceberg of the areas we cover. We cover modeling best practices. The walls, are they separated per level? Are they going through more than one level? The floors and walls, do their functions meet their naming conventions? Are they externally and named internally? How compatible are the metadata with each other? ISO compliance, we also cover and review the naming conventions based on the NBS BIM object standards. Following, do those models elements of BIM objects follow the structure of the naming convention provided by the NBS BIM object standards and reflected in our BEPs and information management protocols or not? Also, do those BIM objects have Uniclass classifications, which is a requirement by the ISO 19650 or not? Do they have a title? Do they have a code? Do they follow the structure of the Uniclass classification? Construction information, do they have the required LOI or the level of information need in those objects based on the design stage? Do they have fire ratings, acoustic performance? Do they have rebar rates to those concrete elements? And the extra bit that we were able to achieve working with our consultants, that to provide information, construction information that is useful and usable by mid-group, such as the new rules of measurement codes, which allows us to create some sort of a cost plan, structured ones, consistent across the stages of the project. The work packages, which is something also related to mid-group, we were able to create cost plan pair packages to allow our commercial team to have proper discussion and proper packages with our supply chain. And I think that would be it. So the idea of the extra collaboration with the consultants is that it opened a new areas for cooperation and discussions with the consultants, like for the 2 packages or the 2 parameters or the information we asked for, which is the NRM codes and the work packages. They were not required by the consultants to add, and they don't have the full information or the full idea on how to use them in our models. So that enabled us to have a more collaboration with the consultants by getting our team to create Dynamo scripts to make the consultants' lives much easier. Those scripts will help the consultants to add the parameters we are asking for. And it's going very well, I think. And that would be my part. Mia,
Perfect.
I think.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Wajdi. So Mia, I guess we'll pass it over to you now to do a bit of a live demonstration around the smart groups. If you just want to share your screen. Stop sharing now.
I will share my screen now, yes, if you can tell me when you see it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I think Wajdi summarized it really nicely. With me, you'll discover how actually those smart groups help you with the model validation and visualization. So the first thing to note is I logged into 3D Repo. This is just a fairly standard Revit model that I have open. I think the first advantage is that it is on the cloud. It is you can open your web browser and log in, so there's nothing to download. And you know, data validation is the process of ensuring that the data is both correct and useful. And at 3D Repo, we understood this, right? So as your projects grow over time, and in many cases, it becomes super difficult to just identify and track those model elements. Some of you might use multiple file formats. Wajdi mentioned it. Sometimes you inherit IFC files, Revit files, and so on and so forth. And managing those changes makes it even more difficult and complex. So this is where you can use smart groups, which is a feature that 3D Repo designed to help validate and visualize that data with ease. So if I look at those existing groups and how it works, basically, it allows you to search for objects based on certain criteria or rules. So you can group the models to, for example, check if the elements follow the same naming convention. So for example, I just want to highlight those columns that have this omni-class title. I could also maybe isolate them and use them in conjunction with other analytical properties. So for example, this is just to validate if the elements existing BIM data is there or not. I could bring in everything else again, just play with my color override and just really elevate my understanding of what that data, that BIM data is giving me. So in another case, you could check if the relevant BIM data, follow the delivery management system. So for example, in here, I could look at those columns that were delivered on site, but haven't been installed yet. So the use cases are super various. In some cases, you might even want to visualize your carbon costs. So in that case, I on top of my data, I can see where I have negative embodied carbon or even some high embodied carbon. And within those highlighted elements, I would want to check maybe those elements that have specific thermal resistance. So it's all about visualizing and interacting with those groups. But if I show you how it works actually, it's very simple. So maybe let's say I'm looking at this compliance check, the columns, and at this stage of the delivery, I inherited that smart group that a contractor or a consultant has created. But I am an architect and I want to filter and I want to look out of these columns. Maybe I want to search for a specific type. So if I zoom in a little bit, this is where I can access the metadata. And in this case, I want to be able to validate out of all of these columns, I want to look at a specific type. So maybe I want to look at those round columns. So it's very simple. I have a group that is already created. I could copy even that filter and add on top of those attributes that I have already visualized, my new rule check that I want to look at. So I'll go with a smart group and I can call this a round columns. So out of all these columns that were compliant or that have the specific omni class, I want to be able to paste that filter. So I'll essentially use that same rule that I had. But on top of this, I want to check the type. And so I don't have to spend hours and hours trying to figure out what my metadata is giving me. It's in there, it's in the drop down button that I can use. So the operation, so the rule can be can differ from number to text to any, depending on the type of the metadata. But all I can do is literally set up the operation, and I'll say, okay, the value is now on top of those columns. Give me those columns that are round. So it's easy. I can save it. And you see that it's all automated. It will give me the number of objects. So if I go back, now I've created a new smart group that highlights my columns in orange. In here, as you can see, I could isolate this and also look at this in conjunction with my other smart groups that have been created. So the process is very easy, and we're trying to make it accessible for everyone, right? So we understand that the errors can cause a knock-on effect through the supply chain if they're not resolved early on. And before even the project is passed on to the teams to ensure it is up to standard and it meets the quality. So now we're making it available to anyone. But I guess another very interesting aspect is the exchange and the transfer of those smart groups. So once I have identified those rules, I think perhaps the most important advantage in here is the auto update. The fact that every time you come and you upload a new revision into 3D Repo, it will always query your database in a way that auto updates the number of objects. So meaning that if you have less, let's say, columns on the project, it will automatically update that number for you. So in a way, you're looking at live data monitoring and access throughout the entire project lifecycle. So this is great, but if I have hundreds and hundreds of groups and maybe I'm dealing with different federations and other models and I kind of want to transfer that information, I could also do this. So the real enabler for that is the API and the fact that we are quite flexible with the file formats and how we transfer the information over. So what I can do is I could export that group. Maybe actually what I want to do, you notice that it generates it downloads a JSON file on my local machine. And maybe what I want to do next is actually transfer over these groups onto a completely different federation or the same federation for some other project teams or for another use case. So all I need to do is import back those groups. And in that way, you'll see that it's super easy for me to transfer that information over. So in here, this rule-based tool is a very simple way to speed up the process for accurate project takeoff or procurement, as Wajdi mentioned it. It can also help you with faster, better project delivery, facilities, or even information and asset management. So once I've done this, it takes a simple refresh. Whether you're on Power BI, you're pulling the latest data on demand or in 3D Repo, and there you go. I have downloaded all of my groups and I have transferred that over to another federation. And I think this summarizes it really nicely. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Share mine now. So going through the smart groups that Mia just explained how to use them. We define the areas, every single area that affect the process of or the services that we do and we deliver in mid-group. And rebar detailing, quantifications, cost planning, visualization, every item, every deliverable we had to go through. There are a few set of requirements that we need to define or need to review in those models. So going through smart groups, we have created a set of smart groups that check every single item or single area of those elements. For example, column split per level, non-compliant roof types, compliant walls functions, and utilizing the capabilities of 3D Repo to export and import those smart groups. We had just to create it once, like a set of smart groups for architectural model, a set of smart groups for structural models, because the objects or the metadata that needs to be checked is a bit different from other disciplines. Also, there's a smart groups for IFCs. The naming of the parameters or the metadata is completely different when you step into the IFC world. So we had to create some sort of a separate set of smart groups. Having all of those smart groups within that project, first, that will give the consultants who has access to those models to check where are exactly, for example, the non-compliant mini-class classifications. He can click on that, he can highlight the elements that has a problem or non-compliant criteria in that model, and they can rectify it before they get the MCR out and before they get any response from our information managers. Once we have the smart groups up and running on 3D Repo platform, we get those data fetched to Power BI. Using the API, using the model ID and the API code, we get this data into our template, the pre-designed one. All we have to do is just to refresh that report and the results will come up, and a list of the criteria. That's why we said that it has to be transparent and fair. So we have defined a set of criteria and it has been weighted to give a proper scoring mechanism to those models in order whether to reject them or to approve them. So we went through the naming convention, the uniclass. Every single smart group has a weighted factor that will contribute to the final score of that model. There are a few checks that just related to the tidiness of that model, the viewability of it, the size of it. It doesn't contribute to the score, which means it doesn't contribute to the rejection or approval. It's just a matter of a cleaning and cleansing of that model. So that is the MCR. And you can tell there are a lot of models. If we had to go through each one of those models to download it and open it, it would take a lot of time. With this process, we just had to refresh that page. And this exact model, it took around 27 minutes to refresh, pull the data, give you the score of that model.
Can you show the MCR basically, because you've just got the models up on screen at the moment, so actually show that Power BI report, I think would help to kind of explain.
I'm not sharing my screen.
We've got the models up, which are great, but just to move on to show the Power BI report, I think would be helpful.
I was talking about the Power BI report, but I was
Steve, I'm seeing the Power BI report.
Are you? Oh, I can't see that. That's I'm special then.
There you go. That's Zoom's, right? That's Zoom.
Yeah. There we go.
What can you see, Steve, now?
Yeah, so I've got it. Thanks.
Okay. So again, those are the compliance score criteria and their weights. We found out that this is the best one because it may. What we give the score based on the weight, based on the importance of this check. For example, the naming convention is very, very crucial to have consistent naming conventions across our models, across our projects. And unit class classification, that will help in the ISO compliance as well. And the rest are just model best practices and model quality. That report will be exported as PDF, uploaded back to the common data environment to fit in the workflow of the review, validation, and authorization of those models. And the consultant will have that report in hand, fully with all the problems they have. So speaking of the score, we came up with a score criteria based on all of the reviews. For example, this model, it's not doing very well, to be honest, but just for the sake of the example. It scores 41, which means that is completely rejected. If it scored 75 to 95, that will give us a approved with code B. The action for code A and code B will be slightly different from the rejected. The rejected, there should be a BIM workshop dedicated to that consultant to go through their model to what exactly he needs to do to improve their quality, which opened a new area of transparency and discussion and collaboration with the consultants. And code B, code A, it has a slighter action plan, let's say, for the consultants in order to push their model above the line. So in that report, the consultant will know exactly how the model, exactly where they are failing, what happened in each area, how many objects. For example, in the model best practice, there are like 10 checks. And in this one, there is only one that has a problem. And there are 77 objects of that check that they failed the review. ISO compliance, those are the numbers of the areas or the models that they failed the check. And each page after that, there is a list of every single element that failed the check, which will give the consultant more insight on where to focus, which object needs to be sorted. Unit class classification, those are the U values for objects, which ones they don't have the proper U value defined in their metadata. And that's how we do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephen Wajdi, for coming on and demonstrating this workflow, because I do think it is a great one, right? Because it's a start to finish process, and I think you guys, the way you guys described it today was great. So thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions that have came through. I said that we've got 5 minutes, so we've got some questions here for 3D repos, some for mid-group. So why don't we go through them together? The first one I'll take. So, can issues be raised to inform designers / consultants that data is missing from the model and keep them accountable? Yes, through 3D Repo. So you can create your smart groups to validate the data, but you can also, as we've seen, to show what data is missing. So that type of process from there, as well as that we have an issue management tool. So We can create BCF issues, which can then be managed within 3D Repo, and then they can be communicated through the various plugins that we offer, such as Revit, Navisworks, etc. So yes, you can inform your designers and consultants that if your data is missing, they need to update their models. Another good question we had in here. So could the same process be used for extracting and measuring carbon data? That's a very good question. This is a question we're getting asked a lot at the moment. I think this is what everybody in the industry wants to be able to do, is be able to calculate their carbon footprint. Yes, there are things that we can do to help with this, and we have a webinar that's coming up on that topic. So stay tuned and keep an eye on our marketing for that one.
Yeah, and in essence, so it's one of the things that we kind of do with this platform as well already is that we, if you extract the volume, essentially extract the volume from this platform, we then can add in kind of a separate kind of database that can calculate it. And that was one of the elements that I showed on one of my slides, was a dashboard showing exactly that, highlighting where all these embedded carbon values are. So yeah, it's a really useful platform to be able to do that.
We've got a question for you guys here in the group. So what were the consultants' reaction to changing the workflow? Which I think is quite a good question.
Yeah.
Who wants to take this?
Well, we did that. The change to the new process wasn't out of the blue. We conduct continuous BIM discussions with all of our repetitive consultants, with all their BIM managers. So at some point when we had the first light that this process is going to be implemented, we had a discussion with our consultants that giving them a heads up that the process will change. It will include a new platform. We described 3D Repo. We gave them an idea how things are going to be to the best of our knowledge at that point. And when the process was formalized, we had it in hand. We had another discussion with the BIM managers, taking them through the process, taking them through how we're going to review their models. Hence the questions that I'm not supposed to add an RM codes or the work package that you need. So that's why we volunteered to create those Dynamo scripts that help them to create those parameters. So yeah, they had it like gradually, but everyone was impressed on how things are going to be managed, how important it is to review their models before they publish it to the common data environment. Yeah. Great answer, Wajid.
And so another good question for the big group team. So how do you see this evolving in the future? What is next from this workflow? I'm curious to hear this one.
There's lots and lots and lots. It feels to me that we've only started to scratch the surface of the capabilities of this stuff. So the smart groups function is really quite powerful. And if you can get anything which is rules-based, you can bring anything into that smart group. And again, one of the key aspects for us is that it is kind of repeatable. So once we set up those rules, we can roll them out across all of our projects. So we're really looking to start getting into so we've done the model validation process, the model QA. We're now going to start looking at design. So an understanding where the models might be lacking design information. So really simple stuff. You might think it's simple stuff, but making sure that, for example, all the doors have got the right fire rating compared to the walls. Those are sort of things that those automated checks that we can do, because it's a rules-based issue. We can add that into the smart groups and then get the report out, and then we can start to really kind of validate that data from a design perspective as well. So that's just one of the aspects that we're looking at doing.
Perfect, thanks, Steve. And Mia, just a question here for you. So can 3D Repo provide a history of changes?
Yes, so we do have a full system log for proper audit trail. Anything that you do in 3D Repo, any changes that you do, you can always extract this. You can also see it available in the comment section if you're doing some issue tracking or risk management. Anything else can be fully extracted. I think there are other questions as well. I know we're running out of time, but just So there was a question, is there a plugin for ArchiCAD available? We don't have a plugin for ArchiCAD, but you're welcome to export to any of the file formats that we support and then directly upload that to 3D Repo. Another question is, can we add data to models in 3D Repo and include that in the checks? So at the moment, we're not an authoring tool, meaning that you cannot just change the data, but we are working on a workflow that allows you to append some metadata to those models, and these will be kept separately. So you can, yes, you will be in the future able to include that in the checks. Very important to mention that these will not be merged into the BIM model. So when you download that, you'll have it separately. Maybe another question as well, how compliant is 3D Repo files with other BIM tools? Can you convert the files to IFC files? So we do support IFC 2.3 and then 4 and onwards. Yes, we do support them, but we are not an IFC converter. So again, we're not an authoring tool. You have to do those conversions in your preferred authoring tool and then upload that to 3D Repo.
Perfect. Look, I am cautious of time. We have slightly ran over. So look, why don't we leave it there, and then any of the additional questions we can come back to you guys via email. But yeah, Steve and Wajdi, just want to say thanks so much for your guys' time. Really appreciate you guys coming on. That was a great webinar and a great demonstration as well. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.